Hey, everybody, welcome to the show tonight. Paranormal Encrypted Rabbit Holes with your host, Justin. That's me. Welcome. Shout out to all of our viewers that are going to be catching up with us later from across the world. Thanks for popping in. Be sure to leave a comment, like, subscribe if you haven't yet. Get on with it. Welcome to everybody in our live chat tonight. I saw Curtis jumping in right away. Hey, Curtis, how you doing, bud? As good as can be expected. We got Grizzly in the house tonight. He's actually with us, our founder here. Put out some good news today. Him and Mary have decided that they can't get enough of each other. So they decided they want to make their thing a little more permanent. So congrats on the engagement, you two. Excited to hear that. Squatch and Holler with us. Hey, Squatch and Holler. Been a while since I've seen you in the chat. Welcome. We've got Pam Harris with us tonight. Hey, Pam. Living with a Purpose. Hey, I know who you are. How you doing tonight? That'd be the other half that we're talking about, Mary. Nate is in the chat. Welcome, Mom. Appreciate you having you here. Shout out to everybody. I got a question for y'all. Has anybody read any good books lately on our topics? Any good Fortean topics? Bigfoot, paranormal stuff, ghosts, anything? I've been reading one. I don't know if we can see this, just kind of a shout out here, called Russian Hominology. The Bayanov Papers, Fact and Folklore by Dmitry Bayanov, Russian hominologist. Really good stuff. He is looking at the folklore, Eastern Europe and Russia, and talking about how it ties in. Very fascinating stuff. You guys got any good reads out there for furthering our knowledge? Put it in the chat so we can all get in on it, see what's going on. Tonight, by special viewer request, we are going to be discussing the Paracas Skulls of Peru. Some of you have heard of this. It's been on Ancient Aliens and a few other documentaries and all that kind of fun stuff. It's an interesting topic. There's not one that people seem to really get deep on. You can find various different podcasts on it, but a lot of times it's the people that are pushing one theory or the other. It's not really a non-biased, thing that kind of puts it all together. So that's kind of what I wanted to go for tonight. We're going to talk about both sides of the issue, what both sides say. And as usual, let you guys decide what you want to think. I'm not one that's going to push a narrative either way. It's just a matter of, putting the information out there for you guys, and you guys can decide which way you want to go with it. I'll give it a second here for more people. Pam Harris said, my first book just came out last Friday. Mafia. Is that the title of your book? Mafia? Living Purpose. Help keep the channel alive and meet our goal of 10 superstars. That'd be fantastic. Absolutely. Pam, let us know if that's the title of your book and where can people get it if they want to check it out. All right. The Paracas Skulls of Peru, also known as the Coneheads. This will be a fun topic. Might go a little long tonight. There's quite a bit of good information I wanted to get in. There's even more out there. So again, if you guys want to go in and do your own deep dive, just kind of use mine as the diving board to launch in. Feel free. Griff, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. The Paracas Skulls. There is a picture. The what? The Coneheads. These are the skulls that were found in Peru that have the elongated backs on the skulls. Okay, so you guys get an idea of what we're looking at there. That is a picture of one of them. Between 1880 and 1947, several hundred sets of mummified bodies were excavated from burial sites in the Paracas Peninsula of Peru. Archaeologists determined that all of the mummified bodies were male, and as well as further study of the contents of the burial sites indicated these males were likely to be considered of high status in their culture. Furthermore, each of the sets of remains possess significantly shortened stature and elongated skulls. For some reason, when we start delving into this, nobody talks about the significantly shortened stature. Apparently, they don't care the fact that they were short. They're all worried about the skull. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on, is the skulls. Pam Harris, The Bug's Life Before the Mafia, Amazon, Audible, Kindle, and paperback. There you go, guys. Support Pam. Check it out. All right. So the specific ones that we're going to be talking about were discovered in 1928 by Peruvian archaeologist Julio Trejo. More than 400 mummies were found in the so-called Huaycayan necropolis, located in the Ica region of southwestern Peru. So these are going to be the ones that kind of honed in on for us. So let's talk about skull cranial deformation as a whole. Okay, so it's known that there's cultures, there's tribes currently and in the past that have gone out of their way to reshape their bodies, whether their skulls or their necks or their ears or their feet. So let's talk about what that is to start with. So cranial deformation was a common among many peoples in ancient times, but the techniques varied as well as the shapes obtained, whether they were elongated or flattened or different shapes like that. So it's a common practice. Hippocrates describes an African tribe. He called them the macrocephali, or big heads, so called because of the practice of the cranial deformation. In Egypt, the discovery of a mummy, supposedly of Akhenaton, revealed that the custom would also have existed among the Egyptian pharaohs, as it was already observed in many sculptures and paintings. In America, cranial deformation existed among the Maya of Mesoamerica and some of the native peoples of the United States. In the Old World, the Alans of the highlands of Iran, the Huns, and some Germanic tribes also adopted this custom. In the late 19th century, the German geographer and ethnologist Friedrich Ratzel reported cranial deformations in native populations of Tahiti, Samoa, and Hawaii. The practice has also persisted until our times among the Mangbetu of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Vanuatu of Melanesia or Northwest Australia. And there is a picture there. We have a skull, and that was the method used, a cradle board, to work on the deformation of the skull of an infant. Now, they don't talk about if this was a painful process or what it was. It was a slow, long, just as the bodies grew, they kind of grew into these patterns. So why are we talking about this? Well, because I wanted to show this is a common thing, but for some reason, these particular skulls in Peru have garnered attention where other ones haven't. So even though this was a common practice, it's definitely not an unknown practice. For some reasons, these particular ones in Peru have become the source of controversy. So that's what we're going to kind of look into. Here's a painting of an adult with some of the deformation, and then again, that cradle board. Here's a picture of a Mangbetu woman and her child with the head bindings, courtesy of Tropen Museum, part of the National Museum of World Cultures. So there are tribes that are still doing this. So, but why? Why were tribes doing this? What is the purpose of it? According to one theory, it was likely performed due to signify group affiliation or to demonstrate a social status. So kind of, the certain elite people would do this to identify themselves as elite. Such motivations may have played a key role in the Mayan society, aimed at creating a skull shape that was considered aesthetically more pleasing or associated with desirable cultural attributes. For example, in the Nahai-speaking area of Toman Island in the southwestern Malakulan, I'm sure I butchered that one, sorry. A person with an elongated head is thought to be more intelligent, of higher status, and closer to the world of the spirits. So there could be some religious or spiritual aspects to this as to why they would want to do this kind of thing. It's also been considered possible that the practice originates from an attempt to emulate those groups of the population in which elongated head shape was a natural condition. There's natural conditions where you can be born with a head shape like that. So maybe people thought of them as deities or special, and they wanted to emulate that. The skulls of some ancient Egyptians are among those identified as often being elongated naturally, and macrocephaly may have been a familiar characteristics. They have found mummies of infants and toddlers that did not show signs of the boarding, but were naturally kind of coned like that. Personal note, when my firstborn was born, Gabriel, he had such a long, tedious labor that when he came out, his head was actually shaped with a cone head. But eventually it leveled back out. So it can happen naturally. Historically, there have been a number of various theories regarding the motivations for these practices, but basically we don't really know why. It's all just an educated guess. We're not for sure why. An interesting fact about this that is going to pertain to everything. Although the processes changes the shape of the skull, it doesn't alter the cranial size, weight, or volume. These measurements all remain the same as regular shaped human skulls. Some alternate theories as to why this kind of leads more into the Fortean world now. They think that the people could have been emulating gods or aliens, if you want to go the ancient origins aspect. And specifically when we talk about the Paracas skulls, some people are of the belief that the Paracas skulls are actually of alien origin to begin with. They're not human, they're not binding, they're not cranial deformation. They are the mummified remains of actual aliens or human-alien hybrid. So those are some of the theories out there, especially with the Paracas Skulls of Peru. So that's what makes these ones particularly special. A couple of points that we'll specifically be looking at tonight: the skull structure and DNA analysis that I found on the skulls, comparing them to a control set of skulls. So we'll look at skull structure. We'll look at what they have to say from people that are for the fact that they're different than human. And then we'll look at what somebody says that says, no, these are actually human skulls that have just been deformed through one of these processes that we talked about. So we're going to kind of look at both sides of it, give you guys the information that I found out there, and we'll let you all come to your own conclusions. All right, as always, guys, when we're having our conversations, please feel free to ask questions. Give me your input. If you have questions, can you put in all caps for me? Just makes it a little bit easier for me to pinpoint them in the conversation. Sometimes I miss them as I'm going through everything. So let's talk about it. Let me grab a drink real quick here. I get the feeling this will be another quiet night in the chat room. All right, so we're going to contrast and compare. According to season 10 of Ancient Aliens, the Paracas skulls are 25% larger and up to 60% heavier than the skulls of an average human male. I remember earlier it stated that the physical stature of the skeletons were diminutive. They were smaller. And now they're saying that the skulls themselves were 25% larger and 60% heavier. So we have smaller bodies and larger skulls, according to what was presented on Ancient Aliens. And although it's hotly disputed, some researchers believe that these characteristics could not have been achieved using cranial shaping techniques. Also, not only are they different in weight, but they say that the Paracas skulls are also structurally different, that they have only one parietal plate, whereas a normal human skull, even one that has been artificially elongated, has two. So they're saying there's actual specific differences. Alternative historian and Paracas skull researcher Brian Forrester notes that the cranium has only two plates, one frontal and one parietal, which he states is not normal for humans. Forrester notes that the cranial capacity of the skulls is over 1,500 cubic centimeters or cc's, and therefore is much greater than that of humans. Now, this is an important argument that Forrester routinely makes. He makes it over and over again in various videos and social media posts, and usually it's something along the lines of elongated skulls have cranial capacities that are much greater than humans. He states that 1,500 cc's is 25% greater than humans' cranial capacity. This is one of his proving points as to why this is not a human skull. Forrester also notes that the eye sockets are much larger, the nose seems much larger, and that the jaw is much larger than normal human beings. So who is Brian Forrester? Who's this guy? He is an author, researcher, and speaker. He's written 8 books and has made 4 appearances on Ancient Aliens. He's conducted extensive research on topics related to ancient civilizations, including the Inca, the Easter Island culture, and the Paracas culture. Forrester is now the assistant director of the Paracas History Museum in Paracas, south of Lima. He is also assisting the municipality of Paracas to improve the number of foreign tourists that visit, as well as its fundamental and expansion in tourism in general. And he offers tours and all that kind of stuff. So he currently lives in Peru. He is down there. He is fully vested in the Paracas Museum as his assistant director. And so he works with these skulls on a regular basis. But what does the other side say? So this is what Brian is saying. This is what he says. The skulls are bigger and heavier. They have higher cranial capacity by about 25% than humans, and that they're just shaped differently. So this is talking about the physicality of the actual skulls themselves. So what does the other side say? We're going to be discussing the work of Carl Fegans. He is kind of the opposite side of the scale here. He is a professional archaeologist that earned a master's degree in anthropology with a focus on archaeology at the University of Texas at Arlington. Among his academic interests are the religious and cult beliefs of prehistoric peoples, particularly in the Near East and around pre-pottery Neolithic. I thought I had put on here. There we go. His current interest, historic archaeology, particularly related to clandestine distilleries, or as we call them in Appalachia, the moonshine stills. He currently works for the United States Forest Service at the Land Between the Lakes Recreation Area in Kentucky and Tennessee, and he records 19th and 20th century home sites that have a rural agrarian focus. So he is active researcher, active archaeology, works for the government. Take that as you will. He is in Land Between the Lakes, so maybe sometime when some of us are up there, we might look him up, see what he's got to say. So we got Carl Fegan. So what about the cranial plates? Take it one by one. Hey, a little Twisted joining us. Welcome. A little under the weather. Yeah, I saw that. Helping run the other shows. Saw you were there. Hope you start feeling better. Always sucks when you're feeling under the weather. All right, these cranial plates. Forrester notes that the cranium has only two plates, one frontal and one parietal, which he states is not the normal for humans. So that is Forrester's statement. Now I'm going to actually quote from the article that Carl Fagan wrote. So it's going to be in that perspective. So when I read it, it sounds kind of weird. That's why. Fagan wrote, except he's wrong. This is actually quite normal in human skulls. The suture that separates the two parietal bones is called the sagittal, and it can close and ultimately obliterate with age. Not in everyone, and not at any specific year, but often between the ages of 50 to 60 years for the sagittal. Other sutures might close as early as age 18 or as late age as 70. The other sutures in the cranium are lambdoid, coronal, paradiomastoid, paradiotemporal, and basio-occiput with basio-sphenoid. So basically, it's all the different areas of your brain, or your skull, that is so soft and malleable that eventually they fuse together to create our hard skull. The sutures are those joining points, is what they're talking about here. So what Forrester is saying is that there's only two plates, one front and one parietal, which is towards the back. And he's saying that's not normal. What Fagan is saying is actually, yeah, it's really not that uncommon. It's the fact that the sutures just completely disappear. It's like a scar fading over time, and eventually you can't see it anymore. So he's saying it's really not that uncommon. And he goes into explain that the sutures separate various bones in the skull. There's 7 cranial plates, to use Forrester's terminology. And not only do they fuse with age, but they also fuse pathologically, such as through cranial synostosis. This occurs when one or more sutures fuses early. It's a medical condition. There are 2 essential types of cranial synostosis: syndromic, caused by genetic syndromes like Apert, Pfeiffer, and Crozon disorder syndrome, and non-syndromic, possibly caused by genetics, but likely a result of environmental factors. So what he's saying is there are actually genetic factors that can make this happen earlier, or it can also be the result of environmental factors, which could include head binding. All right, so what this guy is saying in his studies as an archaeologist, that it's really not as uncommon as this guy's trying to make it out to be. Definitely not impossible. One of the factors in environment that affects the premature closure and obliteration of the sagittal suture is artificial cranial modification. The scientist by the name of Christine White found that most of the sagittal synostosis in their sample set was explained by artificial deformation. What White concluded was that the fusion and obliteration of the sagittal suture was a very likely outcome with the right amount of force and the timing of its application. So where we got Forrester saying this isn't normal, this is one of the indicators as to why this skull can't be human, these guys are saying, nah, that's not true. Especially with the binding, it actually is very likely to happen. So here is a picture. You can see with those sutures that we're talking about. The sagittal suture is the one that goes directly across the top of the sagittal crest area. And what they're saying is they can't see that one, and that forms one solid plate as opposed to 2 separate ones, and then it joins along the blue line there to the back. Some more people joining us. Bigfoot 911, welcome to the show. John Cloud, welcome, welcome. Appreciate y'all joining us live. Excuse me. Grab another drink here. If I can find it. There you go. Any questions or comments so far, guys? Let me know. There's a lot of sciencey stuff in here. Like I said, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. You can really go down into it if you have the science mind. You can get all the specifics, all the fancy talk and all that. But for our purposes, it's just general information is good. Here is some pictures again of the Paracas skulls. If you look down the front, you don't see any of those suture lines. So that's what they're referring to. It looks like one solid piece. There are some sutures lines along the sides of them, along the parietal juncture there, but no sagittal suture lines. So that's what they're referring to there. All right, next note was cranial capacity. All right, Forrester notes that the cranial capacity of the skulls is over 1,500 cc, and therefore much greater than that of humans. And again, he major sticking point that elongated skulls have cranial capacities that are much greater than humans. He states that 1,500 cc's is 25% greater than humans' cranial capacity. But our other guy, Carl, is saying this is not only wrong, but Forrester's methodology of attaining a metric like cranial capacity could rightfully be called into question, mostly because he doesn't mention how he arrives at that number. But let's assume that he knew what he was doing. This is when we go back to, as researchers, guys, it's really important to know methodology and disclose your methodology, right? This is how I got this number. If you want to be taken seriously as a researcher, you have to have that transparency. You have to show your work, as they would say in school, right? This is what I'm stating. This is how I got that number. That way we can proof it. Somebody can go back and say, hey, your math is wrong. Or say, hey, your methodology is wrong. A better way to check it would be to do this. And I could not find anywhere where it was saying how Forrester came up with that number. So I made myself a note for the ball bearing test. I remember, and maybe some of you guys have seen this, a documentary. Don't know which one. Could have been Ancient Aliens. Could have been any number of them out there, where they took a regular human skull and filled it with ball bearings. And they used that to get a volume. And then they measured the volume of how many ball bearings it was to fill it. Then they did the same with the Paracas skull. Now, not going to sit here and tell you what the results was, because frankly, I can't remember if they were the same or if they were different. I don't remember. And I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere for it for about a half hour trying to find where this test was, and you're writing on it. Could not find a single thing with it. So I'm not going to tell you this is what it was or this is what it wasn't. I'm just going to tell you that people have tested it. So if you can find it, if you remember the documentary, let us know. But this is definitely one of the tests that people try and do on it. So Carl Fegan notes, in a study done in 1992, a J. Philip Rushton of the University of Western Ontario found an average cranial capacity of 1,494 cc's among men in the military. To be an average, that means there had to be more than one adult male over 1,500 cc. Bernholt states that the 90% of humans fit into the range of 1,040 to 1,595 cc's, and that the extreme range could be as low as 900 or as high as 2,000 cc's. Richard Milner says living humans have a cranial capacity ranging from about 950 to 1,800 cc's, with the average about 1,400. So this study had absolutely nothing to do with Paracas skulls. This was a completely separate study done in 1992. And here you can clearly see, according to the study, 1,500 falls right smack into the range of normal humans. In fact, not just normal humans, but 90% of humans fit into that range. So where Forrester says it's 25% more than an average human, we don't know. He doesn't specify where he got that information, and any information that I could find. Another gentleman, this is going to be Carl talking again about his own personal work. Said Samuel George Morton, who collected skulls with the notion that he could prove cranial capacity among white people was greater than that of people of color, left a rather large collection of skulls with the University of Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, this collection's data has been made available. So here's a guy that was measuring cranial capacity for a totally different reason. And we have that data. So he looked at it. In that collection, I visually picked out 34 Peruvian skulls that were visibly deformed or elongated, as Forrester would say. Most were from Africa. Oh, I'm sorry, not Africa. Most were from Arica, Chile. 3 were from Pisco, Peru. And 2 were from Pachacamac, Peru. And while Arica is in Chile, the skulls are from the Peruvian period, and the locality is less than 1,000 kilometers from Paracas. So within this collection, he found skulls that would be a close approximate, a good relative, fill in for the skulls that they're looking at here. And using Morton's IC metric, I converted from cubic inches to cubic centimeters, and the mean cranial capacity was 1,277 cc's. The largest was 1655 cc for a 70-year-old male skull from Arica, and that was object ID 1366. And it is still within the ranges given to us by Brunholtz and Milner. So even in his own research where he pulled out some skulls, he found one that was well over the 1,500 mark. So what they're showing here is that statement, 1,500 cc's is too large for a human, is false. And especially the 1,500 cc's is 25% larger than a human is false. And unfortunately, Forrester didn't say where he got those numbers from, which is where some of that criticism is coming from, saying, hey, dude, we can't even check it out because you didn't tell us how you got that. Okay. Forrester also notes that the eye sockets are much larger, the nose seems much larger, and the jaw is much larger than in normal human beings. No measurements, no way to really address that, scientifically speaking. There's no data, just that they are larger, they seem larger. So Carl states that perhaps he's not wrong. It's difficult to tell from the video that he watched. And of course, Forrester does not offer any metrics, show a scale, or provide any sort of comparative analysis. What are the normal ranges for eye orbits, nasal concha, ethmoid bones, and bones? Wow. And mandibles. If you're going to state a specimen exceeds an established norm, it helps to say what that established norm is and how it was established. Again, you got to have your data. Tell us how you got it, where you got it. Very important. That's one thing I learned mostly for me in doing this research is the difference in people saying, oh, this is what it is, and somebody going, okay, but this is how we prove what it is. Let us take a look at it. Show us your work. Show us how you did it. There's a big difference. It's the difference between taken seriously in the research world or the scientific world and not being taken seriously. And it can have a big impact. You might be 100% correct, but if you can't show it, if you can't have your metrics, then it doesn't do any good. All right, so here is what is known about craniofacial features among individuals that have gone through the deformations, like the skull elongation. Prognathism is increased That is to say, the amount of protrusion of the maxilla and face in general is noticeable. This is a compensatory development and very noticeable among those that practice even moderate degrees of deformation. So what they're saying is, yeah, there's definitely going to be some facial differences in somebody that does that kind of deformation on their skull, on their cranium. So without having metrics to measure it by, there's nothing they can compare it with. So they're saying, well, he's probably right because there is definitely a difference. Prognathism is when the jaws jut out further than they're supposed to, either upper jaw or lower jaw. They're kind of misaligned. They stick out farther. They're bigger than what the baseline, the normal should be. All right, the fun one, DNA analysis, right? Everybody loves talking DNA. That's the big buzz phrase, right? DNA will prove everything. Unfortunately, that's not how it works anymore. The Paracas Museum of History, again, where Forrester is the assistant director, sent 5 samples of the Paracas skulls for genetic testing. I believe this was around 2017. I didn't note it. These samples consisted of hair, teeth, skin, and some fragments of skull bones. They were originally given to Lloyd Pye, who was a researcher of the Star Child skull. Pye, in turn, passed them on to a Texas geneticist, name we are familiar with, Dr. Melba Ketchum, who did Bigfoot research, or they call her there. She's not a Bigfoot researcher, but she did do Bigfoot research, who did the final analysis. Jennifer is joining us. Good morning, Jennifer. She's had a busy day, lots of stuff going on in her neck of the woods that she's been reporting on. Thanks for joining us, love. All right, so they did do genetic testing, which is fantastic. They gave us kind of a chain here, so we can kind of see where it went to, and then who did the analysis, Dr. Ketchum. So I'll give you guys one guess, knowing the work of Dr. Melba Ketchum, what the analysis was. Anybody in the audience going to throw a guess out there? Let's see. I'll take a drink, and if anybody is brave enough to post it, tell me what you think the analysis came up with. Nobody throwing it out there? All right. It'll be familiar. When they tested the mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from the mother, they found mutations. Oh, here we go. Little twist that said primate. Good guess. They found mutations that they claimed have never previously been seen and are traits that were unknown to any human, primate, or animal found on planet Earth. Let me read that again for you guys. When they tested the mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from the mother, they found mutations that they claim have never previously been seen and are traits that were unknown to any human, primate, or animal found on planet Earth. As per the researcher, I'm assuming Melba Ketchum, they note a few fragments I was able to sequence from this sample indicate that if these mutations will hold, we are dealing with a new human-like creature, very distant from Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans. So I'm not sure how to break down that sentence. A few fragments of all those ones that she was given to test, the few fragments she was able to sequence from the sample, didn't say which sample, should be referring to the entire collection or a specific sample, indicate that if these mutations will hold, doesn't specify what mutations they are, we're dealing with a new human-like creature very distant from Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans. I would love to find the actual analysis paperwork on this. I couldn't find it when I was looking for it. looking for an article, a paper, a breakdown. Couldn't find anything with it. But that was their conclusion. Even Knight of mysteriesunsolved.com wrote that the biological differences between the Paracas skulls of peoples and that of other humanoids living around the same time meant that it would have been impossible for them to have interbred, creating the question of how they fit into the currently accepted evolutionary tree, if indeed they fit into it at all. So, DNA speaking, according to the alternate history people, as they were referred to in the articles, the other side, the Forteans, the paranormal people, completely different DNA, showing markers that had never been seen before, various mutations that were not human, so far off of human, there's no possible way they could even interbreed. So that's their take on it. I was, however, able to find another DNA study done. And I found it really intriguing because I did not think there would be another one, but I did. So I got that for us to take a look at. I don't have the whole paper. If you want the whole paper, you can email me, tnsasquatch21@gmail.com, and I will send you the link for it. I do have parts of the abstract and the basics of it written down for us so we can look at it. If you are interested in the study, it's a full-blown paper that shows all the research that they did and all the analytics and all the fancy stuff, if you know what it all means. Well, what do they say? I found at the website onlinescientificresearch.com, the Journal of Biotechnology and Bioinformatics Research. This is the article. The Raman spectroscopy and STR analysis of the elongated skulls from the Paracas mummies of Peru. And then I have the scientists that were involved with it: Jessica Thornton, Brittany Johnson, Bethany Smith, Kristen Jones, Kevin Richards, and J. Thomas McClintock. And they are associated with one of the three: Department of Biology and Chemistry, Liberty University of Lynchburg, Virginia, the Virginia Department of Forensic Science in Richmond, Virginia, or the Virginia State Police Counterterrorism WMD and Hazmat Unit in Lynchburg. So these scientists were all part of one of these three organizations, and they did a full analysis of these skulls. This project sought to employ commonly used forensic techniques, including but not limited to the Raman spectroscopy and DNA fingerprinting, to investigate the hair structure and genetic profile from tissue and hair samples derived from the Paracas skulls. Tissue and hair samples were subjected to a comparative hair analysis, Raman spectroscopy, and DNA type using the short tandem repeat analysis, or STR. So comparative means they took known samples of what are known human, and they took samples of the known Paracas skulls, tested both, and then compared the results. All right, and in basic, here's the results. So the comparative microscopic hair analysis and the Raman spectroscopy of samples collected from the Paracas skulls as well as from humans of varying ethnicities revealed very similar hair structures and characteristics that are associated with human hairs. When you get into the article, it specifically tells you what the other samples were, varying ethnicities of humans. It gives a breakdown of exactly like Asian, African descent, Eurasian, all that kind of stuff. So you can look into it there. But basically what they're saying is very similar, the characteristics that are associated with human hairs. Following DNA extraction and amplification of tissue samples, STR typing results demonstrated allelic profiles, so that'd be the alleles, similar and consistent with those DNA profiles observed in modern human populations. Moreover, No foreign DNA or unusual patterns or profiles were observed in any of the samples tested. You guys catch that? No foreign DNA or unusual patterns or profiles were observed in any of the samples tested. The conclusion of the paper: the data generated to this point strongly suggests that the Paracas mummies are of the same species as humans and are not from an unknown hominid or alien society. So we have two sides, and they are literally saying the opposite things. You got the side for the Paracas skulls being non-human, are talking about how the measurements are different, the sizes are different, DNA structure is different, the whole thing is different, and it proves they're not human. And we have the other side going, well, wait a minute, when we test them, everything falls within human parameters. There's nothing showing they're not human. So where do you go with that? The only point where they almost agreed upon was the facial structures being different, where the pro-alien people were like, well, the eye sockets are bigger, the nose bone is different, and the jaw is different, and the other guys are like, yeah, probably, because that happens, but because you didn't give us anything to compare it to, we can't do a whole lot with it. So they had an agreement point there, but everything else is not just different, it's literally the exact opposite. So what do you guys think? What do you say? I think I can't say one way or the other. Here's what I noticed. One side gives you the data. This is the test we did. This is how we did it. These are the results of that test. This is the conclusion. This is how we do it. And I could not find anything like that on the other side. Now, is it out there? Maybe. But I definitely couldn't find it in my research over the past week. So either A, they're not really doing fully scientific studies, or they are, but they're not documenting them properly, which makes them non-scientific. Or they have it all, they're just not publishing it. So why they wouldn't publish it, I have no idea. No idea. You know? We always have that possibility of maybe there's a government cover-up, there's a conspiracy, little twist that says possibly a cover-up. The problem is, for us to say that, we have to have evidence of it. And you can find evidence of a cover-up if there's a cover-up. There is. There's things that just don't make sense. Unfortunately, with this particular scenario, the side that doesn't seem to make sense to me are the pro-alien sides, the pro-non-human side. Why? Because they're not showing their work. You know, when you say these skulls have a 1500 cc capacity, which is 25% larger than humans, and then you have work showing that actually no, 1500 cc's falls exactly within the range of humans. And this is how we know, because we tested it independently over here and over here and over here, that had nothing to do with trying to prove the Paracas skulls wrong. You know, an independent study. It makes you wonder. You have to kind of look at it. And so that's kind of my take on it. This isn't more of a who is right, who is wrong, as much as it is a somebody researched it right and somebody hasn't issue. So that's my take on it. That's my hot take. Griff says, hearing this, I haven't heard before tonight. Yeah, I didn't realize there had been official scientific studies on it. And I had heard the original studies from, you know, Ancient Alien side. I've seen those documentaries. I've seen all that work, but I never looked up the counter arguments, because frankly, a lot of times in our topics and our subjects, there's not a lot of counter arguments because people don't take it seriously enough to even really try and rebut, come up with their own ideas, right? But for this one, they did. So I thought that was really fascinating. I really enjoyed reading through the analysis of the hair and the stuff. I'm a nerd. Yes, I enjoyed reading the scientific paper, peer-reviewed, with all the abstracts and the conclusions and the tests. I enjoyed that. That was fun. But, usually you don't get that. So I thought that was interesting. There was other points that you could dive into. They really talked about hair structure, coloration, different things like that. But I just kind of felt that was just more extra information that we didn't need to have to come to our conclusions. Anybody else? What do you think? Thoughts? I need some more suggestions for shows, guys. I'm running out. I'm going to work on having a guest for next week. I know I got a couple more in my inbox there. Twisted is sending me some. But I haven't had a chance to look at those yet. But please let me know. You can let me know here in chat. You can let me know in comments on the channel. Although I got to be honest, I don't look at those very often. I never go back and watch my own shows. I just don't like the way I sound, so I don't do it. The best way is to hit me up on my email, tnsasquatch. TN stands for Tennessee, so tnsasquatch21@gmail.com. Message me some suggestions. We'll take a look at it, see what's going on. One thing I will be getting into as more information comes out, have you guys seen this stuff about the Great Pyramids? How one of the pyramids, they supposedly have discovered these massive columns and chambers that are now underneath it. Thought that was absolutely fascinating. I'm kind of waiting for a lot of the hype stuff to blow over so I can start researching it. A lot of times if you wait a little bit for the waters to calm down, you get better information than just all the hype stuff. You can kind of sift through it a little better. If you haven't heard about it, just take a look. It's absolutely fascinating. What I've seen so far is there's columns, there's chambers. Supposedly there's some kind of ridging that goes around the columns in a screw fashion, like spiraling down the outside of them. I'm not really sure. So I'm going to dig into that coming up in the future. Hopefully have a guest next week. I should probably contact them and ask them if they can do that schedule. April 8th, I'm going to be a guest on another show. Give you more information about that as it comes up. And then, I will reciprocate. I will have that host come on to our show. I just always think that's the right thing to do. Always give them that offer. Don't think we're going to talk about a whole lot of new stuff for you guys. I think we're going to talk a lot about just my background and where I come from and some of my jungle stuff, because a lot of his audience doesn't know who I am. So I'm just kind of basically doing self-promotion out there. You guys don't want to hear that. You all know who I am. But if you want to support a channel and get the views up for them and do that, then that's fantastic. I'll let you know as that gets a little more solidified. So nothing else going on tonight, guys. We've reached our hour pretty much. Do I have any more slides on there? Nope, that's it. What do you think? All right. Well, I just want to say I appreciate y'all joining. Those of you that joined in live and had some discussion with us. Griff and Twisted. Thanks for chatting in there. Pam, good luck on the book. You guys want to support that? I will shout out that again. The Bug's Life Before the Mafia. Pam Harris wrote that. Amazon, Audible, Kindle, and paperback. Always want to support our audience as much as you guys support us here at Bigfoot Outlaw. Hope you all have a fantastic, beautiful week. Hope things start going good for some of you. Hope things start going better for all of you. Y'all have a fantastic night, as Grizzly would say, from coast to coast and around the world. We will see you guys later. We're going to have our fun little outro. If I can find it, things are getting shuffled around on me. There we go. Good night, y'all.
It's a grizzly.
Should we get out of here?
No. We're gonna watch and listen.
Action.
It's a grizzly.
Oh, shit, should we run?
No.
Action.
It's a grizzly.
Oh, should we run?
Okay. It's a grizzly.
Are you sure it's not a chipmunk? Action. No, I'm out of here. Action.
It's a grizzly.
I'm out of here.
Huh. Maybe it is a chipmunk. It's a grizzly.
Are we gonna die?
I don't know. We're just gonna sit here and listen and watch.
Let's get out of here, maybe.
Fall!